Yes, go live. All right. Welcome back to Ballistic Missionaries. He's Dan, I'm Z, and this is the first time we've managed to do two in a row. Yay! It's a good start. So, as you can see, it is, St. Patrick's Day. So, we're wearing our weirdest stuff.
I'm the hobo leprechaun. This is how we celebrate in my country.
So Dan and I, in the past few years, have found out that accidentally that we're both of Irish descent.
I've known for years.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
I suspected it.
Oh. Ah, okay. But he found out for sure whenever, I don't know, do you want to?
Yeah, things happen. Yeah. Well, we'll go into detail in another episode.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I also accidentally found out I was Irish.
Accidentally found out.
I didn't know. Wait, oh, we're getting shit here. Drop frames detected. Oh no. Man, we had this working so good last time. Okay, I guess it's working now. Anyway. Yeah, no, I accidentally found out I was of Irish descent because I took a DNA test about 5 years ago or so, maybe 6 years ago. And it turns out, oh, look at that. My mom's family is very Scots-Irish and almost not German at all. I haven't had the heart to tell them, though. They're all very convinced of their Germanness. I don't have the heart. So, neither of us grew up celebrating this as a personal holiday, really. But now that we're both accidentally slightly Irish, we wanted to talk a little bit about some stuff about it, like talk about the history of it, and talk about how America likes to bastardize everybody else's stuff. Like turning it into some kind of a perversion that usually involves alcohol.
Yes. We love a good excuse to drink and be terrible to each other.
Yeah. Welcome to America.
Woo! For no reason.
Yeah. So where do you want to start?
Part one. What is St. Patrick's Day?
Okay, so I actually read up on it's okay. So we were both talking about this idea last week, and we were like, and we were both totally wrong on who we thought St. Patrick was as a person. You were totally wrong. You thought he was mythological and two people,
Yeah. Well,
and I thought that he was like a genocidal asshole. We were both incorrect. He is one person. He lived. He was from a Romanized British family, living in Britain. He was born in the 400s, between 400 and maybe 425. Nobody quite knows, but he was definitely.
Some people do, but they're dead.
Oh well, somebody would have known at some point in time. I'm sure his mother was, aware of it, but that was a long time ago. But anyway. So he was born into a British family. This was the 400s. Rome was still involved in the mix, kind of.
Well, they pulled out sometime around, feel free to correct me on this, around 410, roughly around the same time as the sacking of Rome.
Right about the time that he was born.
Yeah, it was like, so they were there when he was
still
born.
Romanized.
Yeah, it was still very much a Roma-Britannic people.
Yes, very much so. He got sold into slavery when he was a teenager. Taken to Scotland or Ireland. He was a shepherd for several years. Made his escape with the thanks. I read up a bunch of his stuff last night. I read his Confessio, and I read his letter to the soldiers of. Oh, I have to remember how to pronounce this. Caractacus, not Caractacus, who lived 400 years early, but Caractacus.
We're not drunk. Neither of us
No,
are drunk.
no, we don't drink really, but so and 25% drop frames. Wow, poor network connection. Here we go again. Okay, I'm gonna pause this. Pause alert queue. Okay, that doesn't. Okay, never mind. Fuck it. So he gets sold into slavery in Britain or in Scotland or Ireland for a number of years. He starts having visions of being able to talk to God. God's telling him, helping him formulate an escape plan, and everything that God says is going to happen comes to pass. He ends up on a boat with a bunch of people on his way to freedom, accidentally ends up getting enslaved again, but only for about 2 years this time. And again, God intervenes and helps him escape. And then
he winds up in Gaul at that point, which is modern day France.
Yeah, he winds up in Gaul after that, and then realizes that God has been working miracles in his life. The interesting thing is that St. Patrick is there were a lot of things attributed to him after his death. Pretty much everything. Yeah, like driving the snakes out of Ireland. Ireland didn't have any snakes in the first place, not since the last ice age. So nobody drove them out. He didn't murder. He wasn't genocidal. He didn't murder druids and pagans. The shamrock representing the
Trinity.
the Trinity also wasn't him. Actually, it's interesting reading his Confessio because he felt like he didn't really do much. Obviously he became a saint. He was an unofficial saint in Ireland starting in the 7th century.
Yeah, the thing though is he was never, what's the term, beatified? Officially by the Roman Catholic Church, but
not until the 1600s. And then he was officially.
I don't actually.
Yes, he was. He was, in fact. So he spent 900 years being an unofficial saint, and then.
There's, to be fair, at that time, there was the way we know canonization now did not exist in his time. The way
because it was such a young.
Yeah.
It was still such a young.
Yeah, there was
religious concept that they were just kind of wandering into the wild, like, hey, there's this dude named Jesus.
Yeah.
Listen to me.
But the idea of you have to perform, I believe it's in the Catholic Church, 3 miracles and a list of things to be able, like codified beatification didn't exist until well after the first millennium.
Yeah, and but anyway, in his Confessio, he comes across as a very humble person. He's like, I don't know, I don't know what the point of writing this is except to try to tell my story. He spent 30 years peacefully living among pagan people and heathens, I guess you could say, and converting them over. And he was a peaceful, humble man, actually. I didn't know that. I'm a fan of the pagans. I like the pagans. I think we need more of them around. So, it was always like, I thought that, he was like a genocidal guy going out murdering pagans, that driving the snakes out of Ireland, snakes being code for pagans, but it was actually not like that at all. In fact, he, in his letter to the soldiers of that guy, who was a warlord in, I want to say he was Scottish, maybe Irish. I can't remember now, but he aligned himself with Scots, and he aligned himself with the Picts, and basically was a pretty ruthless warlord who just went after groups of new Christians and slaughtered a lot of them, and kidnapped a bunch of women who were nuns. In the sense that, they didn't have nuns as we know them today, but, women who basically decided to devote their lives to God, who were basically kind of like the 5th century version of nuns, kidnapped a bunch of them. That's why he wrote a letter urging them, saying like, you don't have to do this, basically. Like, you don't have to follow this guy. It's a mistake. You're going to pay for this with your soul is pretty much the point of the letter. And just the fact that, I think just the fact that he was just devoted so much of his life post-slavery to, preaching what is a sort of a proto version of Christianity to, the wilds of Ireland. I think that's fair to give him sainthood for. He's better than who's that guy I hate?
St. Augustine.
No, is it Saint Augustine or is it Saint Thomas Aquinas?
No, it was Aquinas. I thought it was Augustine. Basically, the guy that goes and says that, I did all that. Now none of you can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it might be Saint Augustine. I can't remember. I really hate one of the saints because he's a blowhard asshole. I have stupid opinions on stupid things. I'm not Catholic. I shouldn't have any opinion on Catholic saints, but here we are. Anyway, so that's the rundown on the actual St. Patrick. Now, you have to understand that for a long time, there was no real church structure as far as we understand it today. It was a very disorganized, organized religion. It was a barely organized religion, really. And so it was kind of, everybody kind of had their own take on how to go about that. So, there was some centralized power. It was starting to form, but
there was definitely some structure when you're getting into the 3rd and 4th century, especially like with Eastern Empire. I would say, especially with the codification of the Bible, with the First Council of Nicaea in the 320s, I believe, 310s, 320s.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
There is starting to be a codification of the what will become. I can't really necessarily say the Catholic Church. Just even by then, there's some divisions between Eastern and Western Church. But when you're getting out into what was necessarily referred to as the frontier, like places like Ireland, which was basically looked upon then as the end of the world.
Even parts of Britain.
Yeah,
so
like
Scotland,
we're getting past Hadrian's Wall, stuff like that is considered like
that's the wilds.
The wilds.
We get that from the Romans.
Yeah.
But the Scots are pretty.
You have way less of a bureaucratic overreach and laid down structure per se. That being said, at this point, a lot of people, I've heard the term Irish Golden Age, I guess, around this point, because there was little interference from, basically things were going to hell during the quote-unquote the Dark Age. So you're talking like 450s to about the time of Charlemagne. You're getting into... Ireland was relatively left alone, but also had enough contact with, with the mainland in order to get a lot of different, I would say, church script, various other documents, and a lot of our knowledge of, antiquity at that point comes from Irish churches. That were able to preserve these kind of documents. It's kind of
without being looted and burned by other people in Europe.
Yeah, like various. I hesitate to use the word barbarian hordes, but let's just say for the purpose of it's the Dark Age is the Dark Age, as truly as dark as it is. No, but it's definitely something. Today we don't know quite as much about, especially out in that particular area of Europe.
But so it would have been, when he would have been doing this, it would have been very much like the start of the Dark Ages, wandering around in the wilderness, preaching the gospel to pagan tribes, druids.
Some of which are not necessarily receptive to that type of thing.
Definitely. And the fact that he was able to do this for 30 years and, he was never brutally murdered. while trying to do it, I think speaks a lot to his personality, because they're probably just like, I mean, we wanted to kind of sacrifice this guy, but he's super nice and he's not doing anything mean or trying to hurt us. We should spare him and, listen to him.
There are definitely some cases in Central and Eastern Europe with quote unquote missionaries coming there and preaching that did not end well, as well as Patrick's story.
No. But yeah, so that's what the world was like when today's namesake was. Oh wait, hold on. Hold on. I'm going to go on our Wi-Fi connector. It was working so good last week. What happened?
I don't know.
You may yell if it comes back on.
Okay.
Is it on?
No.
Okay. Oh. Are we live again? We're live again. Okay. So, as we were saying before the stream disconnected, what the hell were we saying before the stream disconnected?
Yeah, we're just getting into the overlay of the historical context of the time that was going on around the time of Patrick.
It was a crazy place.
So down in Bikini Bottom, him and his friend Saint SpongeBob of Bikini Bottom were trying to proselytize the various denizens of that area.
Good one.
And they had some problem with Squidler. He was definitely a pagan. And now I truly look like I'm been celebrating the season. Anyway, now I'm looking. Spare tuppence. Anybody out there can tell us what a tuppence is in today's money? I'll be more than grateful. And I got a little dent on my head. That's fine. Anyway,
I see nothing.
Yep. I guess you could get to Patrick. You have to kind of get into the greater overlay of the Irish people, which also I guess what we're going to discuss today kind of goes back and forth with the celebration of the holiday and celebration of the Irish people in general. I mean, for them, from what I've noticed, the holiday in and of itself is not the way that we look at it today. Today, it's basically, having a good time, putting on some green, having some...
Getting drunk off your ass and causing debauchery and chaos.
Yeah, but on top of that, it's sort of just co-opting certain surface-level Irishness, a leprechaun, wearing green, going down in a jacket and a top hat. It's a bunch of stuff from Party City or Spirit Halloween, and getting wasted and carousing about. And that's fine. I'm not saying that's bad in and of itself, but from somebody that appreciates history at the level I do, I find looking at the historical parallels to be something that's fascinating.
Yeah, and also kind of sad, being that we are living in modern America, and this is our version of this holiday.
Yeah.
I mean, we do it to Cinco de Mayo too, so it's not just the Irish; we do it to the Mexicans.
Yeah. Again, back to we were talking about an Irish golden age, and basically where Ireland was for the most part left alone to its own devices. There was definitely some scholarship. There was definitely some monastery building, some incorporation of where a lot of other cultures tend to get subsumed by the overlaying, and Europe get subsumed by the Christian overculture, I guess, for lack of other words. There's more of an integration of Irish pagan and pre-Christian elements along with the Christians of the Celtic Cross is a great example of that. And
that was not only was it an adjustment for the pagans on their part, but it was an adjustment for the Irish Christians too. They kind of both made room in their ideologies to kind of fit each other in there. So it wasn't a total, it was very similar to, how do I want to put this? It wasn't one or the other. It was like, well, we can make a little bit of room here. We can live side by side.
I mean, it's still a Roman Catholic overall presentation, but there are elements of its host culture being within itself. Also, things like Irish, pre-Christian Irish myth did not die out. It still found its way into the culture.
And to be honest, in terms of pagan history, it was definitely something that lived longer in Ireland than I would say in the rest of the UK. Historically, it was allowed to exist alongside Christianity. It wasn't as, socially acceptable as it had been, from my understanding, but Irish paganism was definitely still there for much longer than it was in other places in Britain and in Europe too.
But as all good things come to an end, I guess at this point we have to talk about British encroachment and subsequent colonialism of the Irish people, which you can't talk about Ireland, Irish history, Irish culture without that. It's so much ingrained in the DNA now.
Yeah.
It started, I guess you would say, about 100 or so years after Norman conquest. Again, please correct me if you got. But again,
general dates.
It goes like around Henry II. The guy that from, if you ever watched The Lion Winter, that guy.
Who will rid me from this turbulent priest? That was him, right?
Yes.
Thomas à Becket.
Yeah. And it goes back and forth for several hundred years until almost the end of the 1400s that Britain is there. It has toeholds, but not much else. But then that starts to reverse itself around the time of Henry VIII. There's a slow incursion of
English nobility buying up, taking over.
Yeah, more of a. It's sort of I don't want to say a soft conquest, because there is no such thing as a soft conquest.
Yeah.
But in terms of
colonization.
Yeah, maybe. Which gets severe. It gets kicked up high gear, I would say, in two parts. Part one is during the Elizabethan age, and definitely part two is during the time of Oliver Cromwell, the right old bastard Cromwell, and his hard conquest of Ireland and your subsequent. It's not. Believe me, these memes are coming out today. I guess started about 10, 15 years ago with saying like, "Oh, Irish slavery." It's the same thing as African Americans. That is not true.
There has been no slavery of Irish people since the Romans or directly after the Romans, where it's been an outside force. Like I know we said Patrick was enslaved, but he was enslaved by people from the British Isles.
Yeah.
That is actually a fallacy. Oh, I heard my mom say it at dinner once. Oh my God, I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
But what they're talking about is the Irish coming to America as indentured servants.
Yeah.
There's a servitude.
There's even indentured servitude in their home country.
Yes, there was.
As well those who migrated to England and Scotland.
Yes, and also other countries in Europe migrating to the U.S. In fact, in the very, very early days of the U.S., before we were even a country, it was actually very common for indentured servants to come from Britain to work. We had to work in tobacco fields, to work as glaziers. There was actually a lot of that going on pre-colonial times. So it was not an uncommon thing in Europe, in Britain, and especially in people coming to the United States, even before the United States was a state. So we're going to get this out of here right now. The Irish were not chattel slaves.
No.
They were indentured servitude.
There's a vast difference.
Indentured servants have the ability to sign a contract with someone who pays for their expenses to get to wherever they're going. In the case of the United States, they paid for their trip, and they were contractually obligated to work for this person for a certain amount of agreed upon years, wherein they would be able to go their own way. Most of the time they were paid, even just a little bit, and they would, sometimes there was an apprenticeship involved also, but not always. Sometimes it was just working for someone. Now, some of those people were really horrible, as rich people tend to be, but they were in no way considered chattel slavery. They were not property. African American people were property. In fact, some of them were considered less important property than horses. Like there is a world of difference between being a possession and having, your entire life be owned by someone else permanently, not receiving any compensation for what you're doing, being forcibly removed from your homeland in order to do this, and signing a contract for like 5 or 7 years to get a very small amount of money to be able to come to a new country and work there and establish yourself. It's massively different. The only time that the Irish have been slaves, as we know it in this country, was
never. In this country,
no, not in this country. As we understand, chattel slavery was when the Romans were there.
Not even chattel slavery. I think there's a difference between American chattel slavery and slavery of the.
That's another good point. The Romans didn't enslave people the way that we did in this country. Thank you for bringing that up, because they actually had some rights and they could buy their freedom because some of them got paid.
I think that it breaks down to the big difference is a matter of a lack of agency and personhood in one as opposed to the other. But getting back to point,
anyway, yeah,
that's a sidebar. Anytime you see those names that say that the Irish were quote unquote white slaves,
they don't complain like the African American people.
That is absolutely not true. There's a world of different context between the two.
Yes,
that's the point.
Anyway,
back to post Cromwell. Basically, you get this sort of situation.
No. You were going to do the first one, not Cromwell.
Henry VIII, and
let's go back to the Tudor.
Yeah, let's go back to the Tudors. And leading up to that point, another big thing happens right around this point. It's the Reformation. Yes, the Reformation has come to Britain, and it has an adverse effect on Ireland. I think even before the advent of the Reformation, the Irish were seen as both subhuman, definitely as savage and backward. And
not subhuman by that point, but definitely savage and backward.
Yeah, savage and backwards.
Uneducatable.
Yes, lazy and less properly motivated, and we'll get into that later on. But back to point, the advent of the Reformation and the subsequent fact that the native population did not convert from Catholicism to Protestantism, did not help their case with.
It didn't help endear them to the British.
It definitely did not. And in that situation, it only made things worse for them, especially after the hard colonization and subsequent setup of the plantations in Ireland, and basically these.
Irish soil is excellent for raising cattle. So a bunch of British landlords bought up a bunch of Irish land and set themselves up, and it became serfdom in Ireland, basically. And this is an important point. We'll get back to that in a minute, because it had serious, absolutely serious, heartbreaking repercussions.
About 100 to 150 years after this point. But basically, you're getting into an area where many Irish people could not own land. Their ability to be involved in the local politics was submitted. They're
second-class citizens in their own country, because a bunch of rich British people decided they wanted to have a bunch of land and make money off of cattle.
Yeah.
And they pushed the Irish ownership of the land basically out of.
It's not just a deprivation of property; it's a deprivation of their ability to have any impact.
Self-governance.
Self-determination. Basically, the Irish people were again. It's interesting. It's a great irony that while in England proper, a slow dismantling of the feudal system and what eventually would become modernity was coming to England. You kind of have this like feudalistic backyard that is Ireland.
Yes.
That's both feudalistic and proto-colonial at the same time. It's an interesting. I wouldn't say dichotomy, because these forces don't necessarily oppose each other.
Yeah,
but definitely existing and coexisting at the same time, and
coexisting at the same time as, across the bay, or what is it, a bay?
The Irish Sea.
Thank you, the sea. Across the Irish Sea, people in the same social class, and actually sometimes the same people, because there were many landlords who just didn't go over there. They didn't pay attention. They didn't give a shit. Who were embracing this idea of modernity in their own life, but then holding people down continuing them in serfdom, on their properties.
This is also a good point that this is also the rise of the absentee landlord. Yes, the absentee landlord.
That's a good. Yeah, absentee. I was trying to think of that.
The absentee landlord is basically, as he mentioned earlier, was they came and they bought the property. They lived in England, and basically it's a very colonial attitude, as they extract the wealth out, and nothing really comes into the country. They're the people that are quote unquote paid a wage, but they don't own their land. They don't have any say in the government,
and the wage is laughable, quite frankly.
Yes. And the infrastructure itself,
and they don't really get to keep. Most of this was beef farming. This is what so they did not get to, farm other things, because they couldn't afford to, because they were paid so badly. The lords who owned this, they didn't care. They weren't there to see things. So all they were concerned about is just accruing the wealth that they were, on the land that was being worked for them.
Now, eventually around the early 1800s, there is some autonomy given back to the Irish. Not a whole lot. It's still at this point, the damage had been done.
Yeah.
And I don't want to compare this to like slavery or Jim Crow or anything like that, but basically the idea just like that when you do something like that for 200 years, you do a great injustice, you do a great repression of 200. It takes time to reverse it, to correct it, to improve the lives of bad people. And there is not much done by way of the British or
To
a way
help that along.
to help that along.
Yeah. There's something that Dan always says, and it's a great line.
History is cumulative.
Yes, you can't just, and you know that goes with. Usually that comes up when we talk about American history, but in this case, it's like you can't just ignore hundreds of years of being forcibly enforceable servitude of someone else and barely getting by, and then all of a sudden, oh, they leave. We have no infrastructure. Fuck. Stream disconnected again. All right, the stream disconnected again for a second. All right. So if you have no infrastructure there to fall back on, what the hell are you going to do?
Okay. I would like to take a moment here to also say I don't want to build the Irish history and the Irish people as strictly sort of this victim.
Definitely.
This is this victim culture, and that's
they're the Welsh.
They're the entire. There's Irish literature. There is Irish music. There is a host of it. I'm just saying this bit of history of British colonialism is definitely going to have a large effect on the shape of things to come. And that's going to segue, I guess, to our next big moment is 1845 and 1845 through 1850 and the Irish potato famine.
Yes. I didn't mention this earlier when we were talking about this, but I actually, on my trip to New York a long time ago, I actually got to see the Irish Potato Famine Memorial in Manhattan, and it was pretty mind blowing. It's like you don't really understand the full scope of it, but it was pretty heavy. So now, when I mentioned before about they had limited resources because most of their farmland was now being devoted to dairy farming. One thing that they did have, pretty much the only thing that they had, was potatoes. Potatoes are finicky to grow. I've been trying for years, and I never get any that are bigger than that. Weird little weenie potatoes.
But they are nutrient dense.
And when you do get them to grow, you get a good crop. And they're easier to grow in crappy soil, which, if you remember from American history, very similar to what the United States government did to Native American tribes by pushing them onto inarable land. So the Irish had potatoes, which are from North America. Before anybody makes the assumption, potatoes are not native to Ireland. They are native to North America.
Sidebar on that. A lot of countries were pushing potatoes through because of fear of poor wheat crop, because wheat at the time was a staple crop. One country.
Oh, and at the time there was also a lot of blights of wheat too.
That was one country that never really picked up on the potato was France, and that would revisit them a few decades earlier with in the 1780s. Which was also kind of one of the subsequent reasons that one of the things that sort of pushed them over the edge into the French Revolution. But we're not about to talk about the French this week. We're talking about the Irish.
Interesting sidebar though. But so basically, all that the Irish had to eat was potatoes.
Yeah,
that was it. We're dropping frames again. That was literally it. That was their diet. Potatoes.
Again, when you're a kid, you first heard the concept of the Irish potato famine, you think in your head like, well, they just eat something else. I think because you're looking at it from the lens of modernity, you can't think back then. They're like, no, these people are so poor and so not backed by their quote unquote colonial parent country that this is all they got. That there are other staples there to a certain degree, but most of those other crops are
reconnecting. All right, yeah, we're having trouble.
Yeah.
But like Dan was saying, there are some other staples, but potatoes were the most
cheap and readily
cheap and
available.
readily available. Yes, yes. And when they all got wiped out,
Yes.
it was
Blight came through and
yes, it was a massacre basically. A massacre of neglect, pretty much.
Now this is the percent.
2 million people died
Yeah.
in Ireland.
Yes.
The numbers, the Irish population still is not back to where it was before the Irish potato famine.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
Yes.
People were starving. Entire families just wiped out of starvation. Like, I don't think people understand how bad it was. It was just, God, it was god awful. It's like the entire, most of Pennsylvania just dropping dead over a matter of like
basically about four Montanas dead inside of a couple of years. I guess back to point was with the there's a potato blight. The first notice I believe was 1845 or 46, and the first year 33% of the crop failed, and the subsequent year 75% of the crop failed, and this is their only thing that they have to eat.
Yeah.
Now a lot of people, well, what about the cattle? This is where, like, whenever you like say this is a natural disaster, at best partially, and most realities, no. This is definitely a man-made. It may be a partial natural disaster, but it's entirely a man-made catastrophe.
It was a natural occurring disaster, but it was exacerbated to the point that it was because of
it's almost
the British government. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, it's almost parody, but
it was the British government.
It's
they made it worse by trying to ignore it.
Now we got to set up a little bit of history here. In the first year, and this is going to be, it sounds weird, and there's got to be a lot of context to this. There was there were two main parties, and there were other ones there, but your two main parties you're talking about is the Conservatives and the Whigs. The Conservatives, first of all, you can't compare conservatism in 1845 to now. It's totally different. The Conservatives basically still have vestiges of a medieval, what's it? I guess aristocratic, fatherly or
liberal elite.
No, not necessarily that. Yeah, maybe to a certain degree, but I guess
but not in the
paternal. Like
okay.
There's aristocratic paternal overlook on their people is like, which kind of goes back to feudalism. And I'm overall, like I'm glad we don't have feudalism anymore, but we did lose certain things from that, and one being like at least the overlords or your feudal lord, at least. Had some sort of, I guess, social contract obligation to their people. So in the first year,
and wait, also, medievally speaking, the lords would have to throw their serfs feasts for feast days in the Catholic Church, and there are like 20-some feast days in the Catholic Church, including today. So it would basically be like your shitty ass boss just having to throw you a huge feast like multiple times a month.
Pizza party, and then but
yeah, there you go.
Back to point.
Anyway, sorry.
Back to point. They did send relief in that first year, but that following year there was an election, and the Whigs won. Now your Whigs are, I guess, what you would consider classical liberals, and this is not.
And there it is, the problem.
This is not liberal. This is not the social liberals of today. This is closer, like your classical liberalism came roughly around the 17th and 18th century, and really is more. It's way closer to neoliberalism and libertarianism of today. It's basically they were decidedly anti-monarchical and aristocracy, but they didn't. They still believed in a ruling class, but that ruling class was dominated more by the money class. There's a high prize on individualism and of individual failing, of things being more of a cultural feeling, and less reliance on institutions to solve the problem. So basically, when they came to power, and this is the point where the Irish potato famine was in high gear, their approach was to lay off of it and let the market correct itself.
Which, well, you know,
And what and
never worked.
no. And if relief did come, they thought if we just give them the food, if we just give them that relief, they'll be lazy and they will not work.
Because neoliberalism.
Yeah, well, classicalism at this point. There's some differences.
It's very neoliberal.
Yes,
I mean, in doing research for this episode, it was very much like everything that happened after COVID started in the US. We had lockdowns for a few months, and everyone was like, we you know what? So what if a bunch of people die? We need to get the economy back on track.
a lot of the attitudes.
It was
are
very similar to that.
Yeah,
Yes.
the
The idea of it's been a year, we helped them.
Yeah.
They have to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
There is literally no way for them to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
But the British didn't care.
Yeah.
Because
And basically, as a part of that too, all that the cattle that was there, the resources that were there. Again, as they saw Ireland very much as a colonial possession without being called a colonial possession. Still derived value from resource. Stuff was still being exported. People were not being duly compensated for that. And basically, what you're left with is a recipe for mass starvation, and it's a genocide. You can't.
it was. Yes.
It's a soft
genocide by neglect.
It's a soft genocide. I hate using the term because there's just no such thing as a soft genocide. But what the irony of that being, while Britain was making it a deliberate effort not to help these people, places like America, places like
actually the Choctaw Indians. This is a very interesting little tidbit. The Choctaw Indians was the Cherokee Indians. It was the Choctaws. This is very shortly after the Trail of Tears happened. So they had been moved across the country, forcibly relocated onto reservations. The Choctaw Indians sent aid to the country of Ireland, despite the fact that they didn't have very much to send, because they were very generous people. And it was, they remained friends basically ever since, sending gifts back and forth to each other when the other needed help. It's actually kind of a nice story. I don't think did the American government itself send aid?
Yes, the American did send. There was places like France sent money. Prussia sent relief. Basically, about a good half a dozen countries, at least in Europe, and some other ones. I want to say even places like Japan. Don't quote me on this. I want to say various nations and private and public entities sent relief. But basically, what happened is, again, our friends, the British.
You can take a guess.
The British.
What happened with the British?
The British were basically heavily taxing what would come into the border to get their pound of flesh before it got landed. So basically,
and a lot of stuff didn't get to the people who needed
it basically rotted at the harbor.
And then the British, in fantastically British fashion, being that they still considered Ireland to be their colony, became incredibly embarrassed that other countries were, stepping in to send aid around circumventing Britain not doing that. And Britain decided that it was going to tell all of them to stop doing that. Yeah. But then it didn't step up and help.
Yeah, it's
just so. Oh my god! They
said within a year to 2 years. Oh yeah, everything's done. Everything's fine.
Yeah,
the Irish were fine.
Everything's good.
Everything's good. Yeah.
Look, it's fine.
It's kind of the equivalent of like having that abused kid you always see roaming the street, dirty clothes, black eye. That the parents are at least neglecting of not abusing it. So then all the rest of the neighborhood were like, come on over, you have dinner tonight, or well, here's a new shirt I found my kid. And then eventually the abusive parent finds out, like, no, we're taking care of our kids. Don't, and then you find out the parent still doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But that, like, people starved and died.
2 million.
Yeah.
2 million people.
There were parts where they tried to launch infrastructure projects like building roads, and people literally died on the roads, and they would just bury them off to the side in shallow graves. I would say poorhouses and workhouses were
because it was very Dickensian
Yeah,
at the time, and Lord knows the Victorians did not really understand.
They didn't treat their own poor well.
No, they didn't.
Imagine somebody they saw that sympathy.
They didn't really have an idea for systemic change that could help them. They were like, they threw a few coins, they provided workhouses and poorhouses, which were horrible. And they were like, that's fine, my job is done. I don't care.
Basically, the viewpoint.
They didn't give a shit. If you've ever read a Charles Dickens novel, this is what we're talking about. Only it was worse in Ireland because nobody was there. Nobody saw it. They didn't come to check in.
And I'm gonna go back to classical liberalism at this point. And the two solutions to said poverty is either one, your private and religious institutions should take care of the poor. Two, if it is a governmental, quote unquote, interference of aiding the poor, you have to get value extraction out of it. It has to be, it has to be worth our time. We have to make some sort of net profit off of their suffering and their poverty.
This is why they're getting off the top of
this is why you have rises of things like workhouses and poorhouses, and basically at that point when the workhouses and the poorhouses were put up, and there literally tens of thousands poured into it, to where they were overrun with people. Now, with that 2 million dead. We also have another 2 million that flee the country. Those that have the means, either through what little means they were able to save up, or through forms of indentured servitude, or other places. Like, I guess it's like not necessarily like the plantation style indentured servitude of the 17 and 1800s, but closer to industrial, where like basically large companies would go and I guess pay for your steerage to get over there. Whatever the cheapest thing is to get you over there, and you immediately go over. But in either case, they mainly wound up in about 3 or 4 different places. A small contingency wound up in South America. Some in Argentina. There was actually an interesting story about that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But your main drives wound up in one of 3 places. The smallest would be Scotland. I want to say places like Glasgow and Edinburgh have most of the urbanized industrial centers had an uptick in Irish population. The second would be England itself, especially. Again, your industrialized centers, your Manchester, especially Liverpool. Fun fact, Paul McCartney's, I believe, grandparents or great-grandparents are Irish immigrants. But your biggest, most powerful immigration wave is to the United States.
I mean, really, when you think about it, Europe's loss was our gain.
Yes.
Because and despite the... Yeah, America has now entered the chat. That brings a whole other layer of xenophobia in. But it was, ultimately, it was a good thing because we had super open borders. We were trying to get people to come in here. We were trying to, build up our ranks as a nation. And despite
Asians back.
Yeah. And despite the fact that basically the Irish were again seen as subhuman, they were having that huge influx of people was a huge boon to the East Coast, really. So we're getting into about the early 1900s here.
I would.
Are you still around the 1800s?
I would at least like to touch a little bit about your 1850s through the 1870s or 80s. like that mid to late 19th century is highly important. Like I guess at first you have the Irish coming in, and again they're seen as subhuman. They're relegated to like major
cities,
major cities,
the Irish section of major cities.
major. I think your big two. You're talking. Well, I'll put Philadelphia, but also Boston and New York City.
Yeah.
And it was a rough go. I would say the first 10 to 20 years. But two advents happened. One, the Irish, after a generation or so, eventually got at least city and local and state power. They managed to permeate their way into New York City politics, to Boston politics.
And they formed their own mafia, which, as you know,
Yes.
means they made it in America.
They predated the Italian one by several decades.
Actually, that's not true. The Italian mafia was so successful because they had already been running mafias in the old country before they got to the United States.
True. But within the United States, the Irish organized crime does predate Italian organized crime.
Yeah.
But back to the point, the second thing that happens, and probably one of the most important, is the Civil War. There was a large contingency of Irish, like literally fresh off the boat. Basically, your army recruiters were waiting out there, saying, "Look, you join up with the army, you get 3 square a day, and you have a nice place to sleep, and you get to fight for your newfound homeland.
And we'll give you a bunch of clothes that have big targets on them. And you get to run out in front of the other soldiers." Now, that didn't happen, but
you get to march in a straight line and with people shooting at you and cannons coming through. It's going to be great. But being the fact that these people, that the Irish did serve in the war, that they were part of the casualties, it was a slow roll. I think it took about 50 years total. But post-Civil War, their quote-unquote subhuman status started to dissipate, and they were thought of more as Americans, as part of the American life.
Kind of a nuisance, but still Americans.
Yes.
Like, they didn't really want them around,
but that,
okay, they're here. They're not subhuman. It's fine.
But
Just,
Kind of stay over in your
But
corner.
back to their I guess the getting into politics, they also, like, it's one thing to have political power, but you have to go and endear yourself to the culture at hand. And this is where we're going to segue back into St. Patrick's Day. One of the ways they did this is coming up with St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Now,
It's much the same way that Columbus Day was designated in the 30s as a way to endear Italians, which is ridiculous. I'm a third generation Italian American. Like, my cousins are second generation Italian Americans. We don't need endearing. We're freaking adorable, okay? And we make good food. And Christopher Columbus is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But America has a great way of just perverting the hell out of other people's holidays.
what about Americo Vespucci Day?
Yes, exactly. Why not Amerigo Vespucci Day? But so much of the same way that they decided to turn Columbus Day into a thing. They turned St. Patrick's Day into a thing.
To be fair,
But a totally different way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
to be fair, there were St. Patrick's Day parades and celebrations before the 1860s and 70s. There were scattered ones here and there. There were some. The earliest goes back to about 1601 in St. Augustine, Florida.
St. Augustine, Florida.
St. Augustine, Florida.
Maybe they pronounce it St. Augustine.
St. Augustine,
They
Florida.
pronounce it St. Augustine up here. They might pronounce it St. Augustine down there. I don't know.
Okay. But the other one was 1772, I believe, in New England. There was a contingency of Irish soldiers in the British Army that did a parade downtown to sort of celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
To be like, hey, we're Irish.
There are other
let's
notable...
go walking around town.
Yes.
But it wasn't the way we consider it today. It was more of a... It's the feast day of the patron saint of our country, and we're going to remind people that we're here now on American soil, and we're, part of American history, I guess, to a
It's a
point.
way of, I guess, acknowledging and lamenting the mother country that they they can't
Yeah.
go back to.
Unlike it was sort of unlike the because we have it today. It's like everyone's Irish today, but it was no, we're Irish and we're gonna come out and do something to celebrate that Irishness.
Yeah.
So yeah, but so okay, so as we mentioned earlier, Saint Patrick was an unofficial saint in Ireland for 900 years, and then 1600s he was officially granted sainthood by the not statehood, sainthood by the Catholic Church, and the feast of Saint Patrick was feast day of Saint Patrick's was just it was not debaucherous. It was just
It was a solemn religious.
Yes, and low key.
Yeah.
From what I
to understand. It's hard to figure out. Literally, the only thing that we could figure out is, they tried to make the Irish more popular by saying, "Look, here's this holiday that we just grabbed."
I think in a way it's saying
You should like these people. Look how fun this holiday is. That's literally all I could find in terms of research.
In Ireland, all the way up until the 60s and 70s, the pubs were closed on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
It was it was only in the 90s that and then basically there's for them to try to improve tourism, they embraced a turn of twist of fate or an ironic twist. They basically adopt the American version of St. Patrick's Day to try and bring people into the country and improve, boost their the tourism figures
in a bizarre full circle kind of way.
Yeah,
but in much the way that America loves to do, we get drunk. We do it on Cinco de Mayo, only we blow things up then. And then we do it to celebrate our own independence, where we get drunk and also blow things up. And New Year's Day, we get drunk. And like all of our secular holidays are like...
let's be fair. The United States and American culture is me no like read, me no like doing deep thinky thing. Me like drinking and just need the flimsiest of pretexts to engage in that. And
true.
And engage in whatever other behaviors come with that.
Debauchery.
Well, yeah. I need an excuse to go into a Dionysian haze.
But not much of it.
Not much. I just need something. Because otherwise it's pointless heathenism and alcoholism.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing this, I'm celebrating some sort of cultural touchstone. I need to know
that I'm not just an alcoholic.
I'm not just an alcoholic. I am celebrating. I'm Irish today. I'll be Italian in 6 months.
No, you won't.
I need a reason though. Just like I don't need much, just enough to like stay in the acceptable to the culture at large. And on March 17th, that is St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm. But it's also the feast of St. Gertrude of Nivelle, which since the 80s has been the patron saint of cats and gardeners. So,
you have to be both.
Yeah, I like St. Gertrude. I don't really celebrate St. Patrick's Day because I don't really drink, and I like pagans, and I think we need more pagans and less Christians in the country. And
PAGAN, people against goodness and normalcy.
Yes, exactly. What was that from?
That's
the movie with the worst, with the worst rap known to man.
You've never heard the Robbie rap.
Tom Hanks's audition tape for the Beastie Boys and Dan Aykroyd. No, he should not have. He shouldn't have tried it. It was bad. Anyway,
I like it on the keyboards though,
but yeah, that was pretty cool. That was good. Yeah. Anyway, we're like people are watching this. They're like, what movies are they talking about? I've never
heard of any. If you're turning in just now, we're talking about Irish culture, which Dragnet and the career of Dan Aykroyd has probably nothing to do. I don't think he's Irish. Aykroyd doesn't sound very Irish, but
I think he's Polish.
okay.
Aykroyd? Is that Polish? I don't know. I have no idea. Slavic?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there?
You know the descent of Dan Aykroyd and his various lineage. The people of 23andMe want to be one of our sponsors in the future. Please drop something in the comments. We need more than willing to hear from you.
But
That's the point. We were
yeah, what was
talking
our
Irish. Our point was about
I was going to make a point about
St. Patrick's Day and the parade and how things sort of
No.
evolved.
How did we get onto Dan Aykroyd and Dragnet?
Yeah.
Okay. So St. Gertrude. That's what it was.
Yeah,
The Feast of St. Gertrude.
that person.
So, like every March 17th, I don't get drunk in person in public. I don't really get drunk at all.
No.
Every now and then I'll have something to drink, but it's rare. Dan only has one kidney, so he don't drink at all. And so we're not really the party animal type. And I don't like being around drunk people because they're obnoxious.
Yeah.
So normally I celebrate the Feast of St. Gertrude of Nivelle, and I get my seeds started for planting, which I did this afternoon. But we also do watch the Leprechaun movies because they're the original Leprechaun movies because they're just absolute gems.
What about Hornswoggle?
No.
I kind of want to see the new one that came out a few years
The new
ago.
one, yeah, that one actually looked kind of interesting. It looked pretty funny.
We were watching a review by a maniacal cinephile, and they gave it I wouldn't just say a glowing review, but enough to they're all shitty B movies.
But
this seems like a welcome addition to those shitty B movies.
Yeah, like the sense of humor fit. It seemed like. So I kind of want to check that one out too. I've never seen the one with Hornswoggle, and I'm not going to watch it because it looks.
I started to watch it a couple times and fell asleep.
Yeah, I think that's the appropriate response. Yeah,
it's dark and quiet for the most part. So
but no, like I love. This is the only thing that I love about St. Patrick's Day is the Leprechaun. The Leprechaun marathons, the Leprechaun, because they're just the best movies. They're some of my favorites.
The
Leprechaun
to do with leopards.
Or leprosy.
Or leprosy. Despite popular belief.
Yes, but they are the funnest movies.
I guarantee it. Nothing about leprosy.
And so yeah, that's what I've been doing today. I got all my seeds ready to start. It's cold in my house, so everybody's like, "Well, you live in Pennsylvania." Nobody's thinking that. They're not paying attention.
I also,
but it's like, it's cold in my house, so it takes a while for the seeds to start. So it's actually like the perfect day to start them because then by the time the weather gets warm enough to plant, everything's popping out.
I also enjoy Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Oh yeah, Darby O'Gill.
Yeah.
I tend to forget to watch that one, but I always liked that one too when I was little.
And I'm sure there's some other Irish movies.
I don't know.
What was that one with the one in the 90s with Minnie
Murphy's.
What about that one with Minnie Driver? Circle of Friends. I haven't watched that in like 30 years.
Never heard of it.
Oh, your favorite actor, Chris O'Donnell's in that.
Oh God,
yeah, you love Chris O'Donnell.
That guy is so boring.
Chris O'Donnell is his favorite Robin.
I'm gonna divorce him. Mm-hmm. He's not gonna be on the next episode. I'm gonna kick his ass.
It was nice knowing you.
That's not even funny. Carrie Kelly is my favorite Robin.
Other than Chris O'Donnell.
No, that isn't more goofy movies. I love B movies. Like we're big MST3K fans. I'm a huge fan of obviously I'm a huge fan of the what's his name? The original Batman '89.
Oh, also another one you guys get a chance to watch. I believe it's called Secret of the Kells. It was an animated film.
An animated movie, yeah.
It's an amazing film that derives heavily from Irish folklore.
Really?
I can't recommend that one. There's another movie by them that they put out a few years later, and they're
Is it the one with the other one that they put out? That's the one with the Selkie, the girl that turns into the seal.
I think so. Yeah.
I saw that one. That was beautiful.
The animation from that studio is beyond brilliant.
It's wonderful.
in an age where animation is like very generic. Like I like things like Gravity Falls and Steven Universe, but there's a very much in American animation. There's a very sameness to it, and I can even argue that with like a lot of Japanese animation. So to
I
see
mean, you
some,
have stuff like Studio Ghibli, but then you have other anime
no.
that looks the same.
People that did that movie, I feel are doing something different and just something creative. And if you want something that that immerses itself heavily in Irish folklore, I can recommend that one very much so. But in terms of like, do I do a lot of that? That's culturally that's celebrates St. Patrick's Day. Not really. It's kind of a day. I don't go all out like I do for Halloween. I appreciate it, and I like we both kind of wanted to take the moment to do touchstones on Irish history, which history I do find fascinating.
I think there's a bird in our house.
Yeah, or
What the hell was that?
bug or something. We'll let you know after the episode if we survive.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the leprechaun. He wants his gold. I'm the leprechaun! I'm the leprechaun!
Oh.
Because I'm the leprechaun! I'm going to bite off your ear and steal all your gold. The worst Irish accent.
Yep. Oh, shit, we got him!
Oh, what's that?
I don't know.
A year or two ago with
Irish McIrish face?
Yes,
The Irishman?
Yes, the one with Colin Farrell about I guess the two brothers.
Oh, no, they're brothers or friends, I think.
And they're apparently hate each other.
The Banshees of Innersea.
Yeah.
The Banshees of something. I wanted to watch that one and I never got around to it. But yeah, I don't know. Well, it's a good enough to be about a quarter till. I think we've run out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, for the most part, but now we're
So
trying to get into like
We
surface level Irish movies.
but we love history.
Mm.
We're big fans of history,
Yeah.
and we were going to talk about something else. And I was kind of like, it's St. Patrick's Day. Maybe we could do a history deep dive on stuff.
I mean, I think we touched on certain parallels that never, like, definitely the Irish potato famine in terms of xenophobia, on the view of immigration, both in the United States and in Britain.
How neoliberalism has not changed in several hundred years. Really, at the core of it.
Mm.
But yeah, we wanted to kind of do a little history deep dive, talk about some stuff. I think that's all we got to talk about. But happy St. Patrick's Day. Don't end up in a ditch face down with your pants down because you got drunk. Nobody likes that.
Yeah,
It's not good.
Because March 18th is just another day. And
It's Tuesday. You gotta
That's
go.
why you're just drunk in a ditch.
Oh, Mardi Gras. That's another one where people love to get drunk.
Yeah.
I made him watch the live Mardi Gras streams.
It was a fascinating. I did feel like one of those like sociologists watching
Very much so.
some sort of tribal band do their ceremony and
Tribal band of drunk people.
both in shock and horror, but in awe and morbid curiosity.
Mm-hmm. And we got to see titties.
Yeah, we did get to see titties.
I didn't get to see any. I missed them all.
Yeah, you missed them all. I was in there.
I miss him every year.
Basically, I would inform Sue by doing a polite and dignified titties.
They were gone by the time I looked, though. Oh, well.
It's a blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah. So, we're going to go eat Indian food tonight. I know people are probably like, oh, they're going to go have, like, corned beef and cabbage or some kind of potato stew. No, we're having Indian food. But there's potatoes in the Indian food, so.
Funny part, the corned beef and cabbage thing is like, even the Irish are like, yeah, we don't really eat that over here. Like,
Yeah.
you guys came up with that because it was like We kind of like bacon and cabbage over there.
Oh, is that what
Yeah, it's closer to bacon and cabbage. Like my first thought was like, do they boil the bacon? If so, gross.
Oh God, I hope not.
I thought corned beef and cabbage was gross, but I mean, I at least can pick it out. Like, but boiled bacon's just again. If anybody out there knows if it's boiled or not, please let me know. I would be somewhat interested in knowing, and then I will purge that from my mind about 2 seconds later. But
I do like corned beef and cabbage. My Italian grandmother used to make really good corned beef and cabbage. Believe it or not.
I find cabbage to be the most bitter, boring thing of the. I guess was it lettuce, spinach, green food family.
Cabbage is a oh, what's the name? It's a cousin to cauliflower, broccoli.
Okay.
Oh, I can't think of the name.
Well, even if it's in that family, it's better. It's the worst one of the bunch.
It's in the makes you gassy if you eat it raw family.
Yeah, it's.
And sometimes makes you gassy if you eat it not raw.
I mean, if it's one of the things I'm starving, I'll eat it. I mean, like I'm not. If there are choices in this world, I'm not choosing cabbage.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not choosing cabbage. I just choose to live.
Anyway, we're gonna go. We'll see you next week.
Yep,
Hopefully we'll get the stream.
Most people in the British House do.
We're gonna have a nice curry.
Curry.
Yes, I do actually I make it with curry powder, but to my defense, I used to make it with until I realized what was in curry powder. I used to make it with everything that was in curry powder. Other than the fenugreek. So I was already making curry. It was just being spiced slightly differently, but it's good. It's not Irish, but
It'll make you do a jig the next morning.
woo! But anyway,
that was the most racist thing we will do on this program. We like to apologize to if that one person happens to be Irish. Thank you, one person. And please don't think that we think any less of the Irish people. We think very highly of them.
Yes.
We hope more of them become our listeners and viewers.
yes, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna go.
huge in Ireland.
We're gonna go. Stop talking. We're gonna go. Okay, bye.